Barna has a history of doing research with pastors, and so we thought if we just go out and survey all of our pastors to see who is involved in multi-site expansion or church planting in some way, then we'll get kind of a representative sample of what those models look like. And so it's called More Than Multi-Site because it wasn't just multi-site. We learned that it's actually really hard to put a model on these things. So, as we heard this morning from both Dave and Jim, that the model of church growth has evolved from kind of mega churches to multi-sites and church plants, and now it's this like hodgepodge of all sorts of combinations of those different models. And it looks different for every church because their mission is different and the markets that they're serving are different. And yes, I just said that word market, which means the neighborhoods. So they're going to contextualize to their unique gifts and skills and situation. So one thing we looked at was, is there a way to come up with models? And Dave said this morning, the 2x2 grid that he showed you is spot on according to the data from this study, which is that there's kind of a 2x2 grid of church planting, which is more of a decentralized method, and then multi-site, which is more of a centralized kind of government or leadership structure. And then within that, there's kind of the fast-growing and then the people who are more dabbling in that. So we actually created, based on all the different pastors and church leaders that we interviewed, 5 different models that you're going to see in a couple of these slides. I just want to explain them to you so that it makes sense when you see them. So it's multi-site, which is that centralized, and oftentimes those have the same names, or planting. And then we have what we call beginners and strategists. So beginners are those who have 1 or 2 or 3 new campuses, new sites that they have planted or started. And then when you get into 4 or more, the game changes, because then you start to scale in terms of the way that you train people and the way that you press out your culture into other churches. So in fact, there was quite a distinguishable line at 4 or more campuses or churches. So we kind of have strategists and beginners, depending on how many of these communities they've started. And then the last thing that you'll see kind of 5 bars on some of my slides, is what we call a location partner. That's a group that might have started a specific congregation within an existing church. So that may be like there might be a second language type of service, or there may be a young adult service. So it's acting as its own congregation, but kind of in partnership with a church that's there. So 5 kind of models you'll see. What was interesting, though, the common theme for every one of them, and you heard this from Jim this morning, that we went in thinking, okay, this was their expansion management tactic, and that wasn't the case at all. Well, not at all. There were a few, but for the most part, almost every one of those leaders we talked to, they were doing this because they were actively trying to reach a specific area or neighborhood, or responding to a specific call they had to reach a community with the gospel.